Good day, grade 12s. Moving on to our next market structure, we have our oligopoly. So an oligopoly is a market structure in which a few sellers dominate the market, meaning 2 or 3 or 4 sellers that dominate the market. There might be more businesses than that amount, but only that number dominates the market. So the decisions they make influences the others, and those major players also have to consider what each other is doing. So let's have a look at the characteristics. First of all, if there's only 2 sellers that dominate the market, we call it a duopoly. Then the characteristics, the type of product is either homogeneous or differentiated. If the product is homogeneous, meaning exactly the same, then it's a pure oligopoly. If it's a differentiated product, then it's a differentiated oligopoly. So entry into the market, new producers have free entry. So there's nothing stopping them apart from the fact that there are dominant players already. So it's free, but it might not be easy. Control over prices. The oligopoly firms have a fair amount of control over the prices. We discussed that in more detail over the next few slides. And then very importantly, there's mutual dependence. And this is very important in the oligopoly. It's probably the most important defining characteristics about oligopolies is that they are mutually dependent, meaning they all look to each other before they make their decisions. So they depend on one another before they take action. So, in an oligopoly, they tend to engage in non-price competition, only because when we discuss the graph, you'll see that the price competition will result in price wars, and it will be destructive. It won't be beneficial to any of the businesses. So, non-price competition involves product differentiation, making your product seem unique by giving it different characteristics or qualities. Efficient service, advertising, after-hours sale, brand loyalty, etc. Obviously, the participants carefully observe their competitors, and examples of this market structure are car dealers and the cell phone industry in South Africa. Then if we look at collusion, so in an oligopoly market, there is opportunity for collusion because you don't really know what your competitors are going to do. And as I said, when we discuss the kink demand curve, you will see that they're mutually dependent. So it will be beneficial for them to know what each other is doing. Collusion is an agreement on prices and production quantity. So businesses sitting down together, discussing prices and how much they're going to produce in order to maximize their profits. There's also less uncertainty, and that makes it more difficult for other businesses to enter the market. There are 2 forms of collusion. Please make sure you know the difference for examination purposes. It often gets asked. The first one is cartels, which is formal collusion, meaning the businesses literally sit down together, like in the old mafia movies. They discuss things, they discuss prices, and they agree on it. The second form, cartels, is also known as overt collusion. Overt collusion. Then we have price leadership. Price leadership is a tacit form of collusion, meaning it's not a formal meeting where they sit down and agree on things, but generally one of the businesses tends to change prices and then the others follow. So price leadership is obviously it can't be prosecuted under the Competition Act because it's not a formal agreement, but cartels are illegal. So here's just a bit more information about cartels and price leadership. The main difference between the two is cartels is formal, whereas price leadership is done silently, so it cannot be prosecuted. If we think of price leadership, we can consider Vodacom as our price leader in the cell phone market industry. So let's look at our graph. So, as I've told you before about economics, there are many theories and there are many ways to explain different behaviors, etc. Just the same with an oligopoly market. There are different ways or different graphs, models to explain. But in our syllabus, we use the kinked demand curve model. So the kinked demand curve, as you can see, the demand or the average revenue curve, this one, is not a straight line. It's elastic up to a certain point, and then it becomes more inelastic. So let's go through the theory of it. As I've said to you, the firms are mutually dependent, meaning they look at one another. So our equilibrium price, if you are asked to analyze a graph, your equilibrium price will always be where the kink occurs. So at higher prices, it's more elastic, meaning if one of the firms increase its price above the market price of P or above the price of P, not many customers will follow that business and keep buying from them. They would rather go to somebody else because they know that that product is available. At lower prices, in this more inelastic part of the demand curve, businesses will not lower their prices because they know that as soon as they lower their prices, all the other firms will lower their prices too, and they will do it quick enough so as not to lose customers. So the main feature of this kink demand curve, obviously, is the demand curve, which has a more elastic part at higher prices and a less elastic price at, or less elastic demand at lower prices. It just means at high price above P, customers are more sensitive to changes in prices, whereas prices below P, customers are less sensitive. So your equilibrium price and quantity will always be at the kink. Please take note that the marginal revenue curve is below the average revenue curve. Also, there is a break in that marginal revenue curve, and your marginal cost curves will fall somewhere in that break. So we will also go through drawing it at some time next week. So here is the theory behind what I've just explained to you about the graph. And lastly, we look at the comparison with perfect competition. So, oligopolies, in the long run, they can make economic profit, but generally these oligopolies use it for research and development to try and get the upper hand on their competitors. They don't produce at the lowest point of the average cost curve, so therefore their prices charged are higher. Also, the price is higher than the marginal cost curve, so there's a loss of welfare on behalf of the consumers, and therefore there's higher prices and lower production. And that is it for oligopolies. So again, just make sure you know how to draw the graph, you know the specific characteristics, and you're able to write an essay on all of those characteristics. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.